If you'd like to take your Bibles, turn to Romans chapter 16, verses 17 and 18. Have you ever heard the old saying, sometimes we're our own worst enemies, right? Pogo put it, I have seen the enemy and he is us. That's the truth. There are very few things. It was said, oftentimes, it's been said in the past, and I'm trying to remember who originated the quote, but the idea that, speaking of the United States, saying that there's no enemy from the outside that could take us down. If we destroy it, if we're destroyed, it will be from within. We will destroy ourselves from within. I think that's the case in almost any group, any organization. They are their own worst enemies. And the church is no exception. The church has been able to sustain itself through God's help with almost every outside enemy from the very beginning of its inception. From the Roman government all the way through up to present-day communist governments outside of this country who seek to destroy the church contained within its borders, the church has always been able to withstand the things of this world. But the one problem that we've had is when we seek to destroy ourselves from within. When our enemy is found within our own doors, within our own walls. I believe that's the case even today. Now, understand, I speak this sermon. I do not see some issue here that I'm trying to address. I don't believe that this congregation is trying to destroy itself. I'm speaking of the church worldwide. And the truth of the matter is, this hasn't always been the case. From the very beginning, this has been the case. The church was able to withstand the problems from the outside world, but from the inside, it was difficult to mount a defense because of the way that Satan used those inside of the church to just try to destroy it from within. We're going to get our lesson this morning from that idea, that concept that there are those who are within and without the church that will intentionally and sometimes unintentionally seek to just create a division and obstacles to our faith. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It may happen here. I hope not. I hope that if something like that rears its head, that we are quick enough, we are observant enough that we can stop that before it occurs. But we have to be observant. We have to understand. We have to know what's going on. We have to be aware. We have to have our eyes open. We cannot put blinders on and continue on as if nothing's wrong, if there is, in fact, something wrong. The Lord wants us to be steadfast. It wants us to be unified. And that is going to be the key to our persevering to the end. You know, oftentimes we think about the Christian's greatest threat. The greatest threat comes from atheism or other world faiths, other denominational faiths, other world faiths. That idea, sometimes we get so caught up in that, we get so scared of that. I read an article recently, and I put about as much faith in it as I put in anything else written by man. But these people posit that within 100 years, atheism is going to be almost non-existent in this world, based on current world trends. Now, understand this. Substituting atheism for any other world faith is no better for us. It's not bringing anybody else to the Lord. But it's that concept. We think we're so scared about those who do not believe in God somehow destroying us. And that's not the case. We don't have to worry about something like that. We are the Lord's church. The Lord's church will never vanish from this earth. It's been promised us that. We will not die. This kingdom will not die. We're eternal. We're eternal. We're going to be here regardless. There may be fewer of us, and we may be worshiping in the shadows, but you know what? That doesn't make us any better or worse than the first century Christians. We often think that that's our greatest threat. And while those can be a detriment, and they certainly can be a concern, because we do have to address that. We have to deal with that. We have to deal with that assault on our faith. We have to mount a defense of those things. The biggest obstacle is put in our way I believe, by those who believe. Those who claim the title of believer. These are the folks that are going to put their biggest obstacle in our way. And we'll read about that in the first century. Paul's greatest persecution did not come from those who did not believe in God. As a matter of fact, in that particular point in time, there were very few who did not believe in a God of some kind. If you remember, we've talked about his discussion with the folks on Mars Hill in Greece, ancient Greece. They were very religious people. They believed in many gods. Did that make them any more righteous? No, it certainly did not, because they believed in many gods. But Paul's persecution didn't come from atheism or even from the pagan religions that were found in the Roman Empire at that time. But it came from those who were wanting to bring the old law forward into the New Testament Christianity. And from this, we can know that blending the old and the new is not a new practice. As a matter of fact, if you come back this afternoon, we're going to be starting our discussion on parables. And the first ones that we're going to talk about are the idea of blending the old and the new and how that doesn't work. It does not work very well. It's not supposed to work at all. But this is what was going on. In Acts chapter 15, verses 4 and 5, if you want to hold your place at Romans 16, and just turn to Acts chapter 15, verses 4 and 5, we'll get our first text this morning. Acts 15, verses 4 and 5, and reading, "When they came to Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the church and the apostle and the elders, and they declared all that God had done with them. But," three-letter word that it always signifies some issue, right? Always signifies something that's going to happen. And it's usually something bad. "But some believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees rose up and said, 'It is necessary to circumcise them and to order them to keep the law of Moses.'" So here you have a group of believers. Now, it lists them as a group of believers. This is not something we assume they are. This is something that divine men said they were believers. But they were also of the party of the Pharisees. So what did they want? They wanted to continue to keep the old law and to bring the old law forward into the New Testament Christianity. Well, we know that the old law was nailed to the cross. It is no longer in effect. We were not bound by that. Even today, we are not bound by the old law. We discussed it this morning in class, the idea of the old law and the new. We're not bound by the old law. The old law is dead. It no longer avails anything. And if we were to keep some of the old law, we'd have to keep all of the old law. Why would you keep the old commandment of circumcision and not keep the rest of the old law? We can't pick and choose which part of that we want to keep. And that's what they were trying to do. Well, let's bind this particular portion of it. So what we'll do is we'll first, because salvation is of the Jews, first we'll make them a Jew, and then they can become a Christian. Not so. That's not the way it works. Peter, of course, along with the rest of the apostles, that council in Jerusalem saw this for what it was. It was an attempt to maintain the old guard along with the new. They wanted to maintain a sense of authority that they once had. Remember, the Pharisees were the ones, if you wanted to know about the law, if you wanted to know what it was to be pleasing to God, you would go to the Pharisees because they knew the law. They were able to quote it off the top of their head. They knew everything about it. They could tell you within a degree about how much was enough and what was to be done and all of these things. So what you had is you had a group of believers who wanted to believe in Jesus but still wanted to maintain a sense of authority under the old law. Well, Peter and the apostles knew that for what it was. They knew it for what it was. And they counseled among themselves. And when you're talking about this, they're seeking counsel from God. It's not simply just asking themselves, what do you think? Let's take a vote. Popular opinion. They wanted to know the answer. They wanted to know the truth. So what did they do? They said, this is what we say. This is what we're going to do. This is how, remember, you're going to bind what I'm telling you to bind. You're going to loose what I'm telling you to loose. This is what they're binding and this is what they're loosing. Verse 20. They were told, these Gentile Christians, those who were coming to the faith from outside amongst the nations, they were told to abstain from things polluted by idols, from sexual immorality, and from what had been strangled, and from blood. Now, in this, they saw the peril of creating obstacles to those who were turning to God from among the nations.